So yeah, let's just do a quick intro. Andy, you want to let everybody know who you are, what you do over at OneOncology?
Andy Corts, Chief Technology Officer at OneOncology, and the only thing I would say, it's dangerous to have me later in the panel because I can't refuse a drink at the Hermitage Hotel. But luckily, I transitioned to Diet Coke, so excited about being here. From a technology perspective, I think our biggest investment at OneOncology has been data and analytics. So super excited to share kind of what we're working on and hopefully where we're going in the future.
Awesome. John?
That's working. I'm John Phillips. I'm a radiation oncologist by training, but before I was a radiation oncologist, before I went to med school, I was a computer scientist. My background from undergraduate is in computer science. Before I was here, I was medical director of Pathways at Dana-Farber in Boston, where we thought a lot about these problems of structured data and how do you turn structured data into clinical decision support tools. I also run a small subgroup lab at the Computational Neuroscience Outcomes Center at Harvard, which is at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, which basically looks at how do we make predictions about particularly neuro-oncology problems using computational methods, machine learning, things like that.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for agreeing to be on the panel. I think it's been a great night. And sorry, I didn't mean to skip your introduction. You need no introduction, obviously. We all know who you are. But I think, sort of segueing off of the talk that Dr. Dickson just gave, I think clinical decision support is a big topic. A lot of questions probably for the physicians. I mean, obviously, I think you guys are thinking about this. Andy, let's start with you, just, from the technology sort of background. Like, how are you guys thinking about, I mean, obviously, they talked about prompt and the precision medicine piece, but broader clinical decision support, like, what's your roadmap? What are you guys thinking?
Well, one thing I've learned at OneOncology is if there's not an ROI, it's really hard to get investment. So we're doing a lot more thinking than we are acting. I think what we've looked at least what I've looked at, is take a broader look at the industry, mainly look at the West Coast and say what's going on there. And I think we've seen like two examples of where decision support outside of healthcare has actually made a great ROI. One of that is Copilot for software development. So LLMs are great at structured language. And Copilot, at least for Microsoft and what they've done there, has really augmented the capabilities of a developer. You could make an argument now, whether you hired a software developer at Tennessee Oncology or OneOncology, if we had leveraged the right decision support for them, we could get 10x the productivity. I think the other areas we've seen successful decision support is we've seen customer support desk shrink in size and AI be able to take on a lot more of the customer support capabilities. I think those are two great examples of where we've actually seen an ROI. I think healthcare gets a lot trickier, as we were talking about, and everybody would love PubMed loaded into a decision support engine. All of a sudden, you've got all this data. But the other one I want to talk about is probably the next best use case. It's probably got the most revenue on AI right now, and that's Tesla through full service driving. So when we think about autonomous driving, everything that they've done with that to date has generated a ton of revenue. And I think the most interesting thing I heard the other day about Tesla was you have about 1,000 developers, 2,000 developers at Tesla, 100,000 employee company. They were working on 11 versions of self-driving, and they were doing it in a very deterministic way of like, we're going to train the model what a stop sign is. And then what to do if there's a stop sign? What do we do if there's a dog in the road? What do we do this? And to me, there's a broad analogy to self-driving, to what it's like to be a physician taking care of patients. There's so many edge cases that Tesla ended up with this bloated 2 million plus lines of code, and they only got 90% of the way there, and they can never get to 91, 92, 93% there for driving. And one of the things they did is, and they did this summer, is they literally as a team said, we're going to eliminate and fork and get rid of all the previous versions. And for version 12, they adopted what we call an imitation model. So we're going to take cameras in the car, and all we're going to do is, this is kind of, they call it multimodal, the idea that we're going to know what a driver does when we see a stop sign. So instead of actually having to tell the AI that's a stop sign, we're just going to recognize the pixels, take as little code as we can to recognize the pixels, and then figure out what the steering wheel does and what the brake does. And all of a sudden, they've gone from 2 million lines of code down to a fraction of that. It's a lot more efficient. And all of a sudden, you know, it's Occam's principle, they call it, or Occam's razor. The idea is the simplest answer is always the best one. And so, to me, it relates a lot to like what we could do instead of actually trying to input all of this data about all this PubMed and all these edge cases that I think will end in bloat and so much decision support it'll actually not be worthy, is how can we do a better job of kind of imitating what our best physicians do and understanding that output. And I think that will be a direction that we ultimately end up going. But, you know, so for now, we're doing a lot in the structured data world. Right. We're not doing a lot in the AI world, but a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, we don't have the same capital structure that Tesla does.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's
some of the stuff
we just need Natalie to get out her personal checkbook and
yeah.
We're not getting very far.
So, John, like, I mean, I told you during dinner, like, how fascinated I am about this lab that you're running at Harvard. Like, give us sort of a brief rundown of it, and then what are you guys doing in, like, the realm of decision support?
Yeah, so, you know, the way we got into the space is, the way I think about AI is it's a platform shift. So we only have a few technological platform shifts that happen about every 7-8 years. And so platform shifts that happened before that were the internet, when we went from not being online to being online. And then the next platform shift was mobile, where we went from doing everything at a desktop or a laptop to doing everything on our phone. AI is the next platform shift, and we still don't know what it looks like on the other side of that. But we got interested really early on. We started working on things about 2016. Where most of our lab's work was dedicated, or still is dedicated, is into building out these predictive models. So how do we take an MRI on a patient who's just been treated for glioblastoma and predict their survival? How do we look at things that's hidden in MRI data that a human can't see, even a highly trained neuroradiologist, but a model can pick out pixel by pixel using something called radiomics and actually predict whether or not someone's responding to a therapy, whether they're responding to immunotherapy or radiation. I think that, you know, those things are the low-hanging fruit, where it's pretty easy to see A to B. I think where the more exciting stuff is the part we don't really have a good understanding of, which is what is it going to be to carry AI in your pocket in the clinic? What does that even look like? Is that going to be you're walking around with your phone open, recording you? Like, what do those things look like? And I think we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg there. I thought Natalie brought up a lot of good points in her talk. And I think one of the trickiest parts is HIPAA. It is so easy to go out and say, I'm going to plug an AI model into your music learning preferences, and it's going to predict what you like, and it's going to build you a playlist and all of those things. If you want to build software in the medical space, you have to go through HIPAA compliance, which HHS doesn't even really have good guidelines for what that looks like in the data space right now. And if you want to pull in a tool, most of the tools that are being written out there, so if you want to take something off the shelf to build software in these spaces, they don't even, the top line is like, we don't play in healthcare. We don't do HIPAA. We don't do people don't do SOC 2 compliance, which is compliance for Europe, and people don't do HIPAA because they're the hardest compliances to get. And so I think a lot of things are going to be left to us to do internally. There are going to be vendors that are going to do things in collaboration with us. But I think the field specifically will have to do a lot of the work, just because otherwise we're going to be the last in line, because our data is so difficult to work with from a compliance standpoint. People are going to do music, and they're going to do social media, and they're going to do consumer products, and they're going to do every single thing they can, and then come to us last because it costs 10 times as much, and it's much more difficult to get it involved in.
Yeah. So Natalie, you and I think have beat to death what TO's thinking about. So I won't ask you to detail all that unless you have something else that we haven't talked about already that TO's thinking in the AI space. But put your physician hat on. Take your leader hat off, your administrator hat off, and just pure med onc. Like, what do you see as the barriers to clinical decision support for you as a physician? Again, take the administrative part out of it, and what sort of scares you. And I know you talked about legal and stuff, but just more so from a day-to-day workflow standpoint, like what are those barriers that you're thinking about or concerned about?
So I can't really separate my physician from my leadership. It's just kind of one and the same. But when I think about AI, I'm going to kind of flip that question a little bit. When I think about AI for medical oncologists or for myself, my partners, it needs to be something that's going to help me take better care of patients. So what can we bring into the practice so that it frees me up to be able to sit with my patient and have that time and not worry about clicks or structured data or this or that, right? And when you speak to docs everywhere, what are the things that bother us the most? Prior authorization and everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Good call. Yeah.
And then you're also stressed about what am I doing everything for this, apart from just speaking to the patient, examining, coming up with a recommendation. Am I doing everything around the patient that will meet the requirements for all these value-based care arrangements that we have with payers? So payers again, right? And then, are we really providing the needs of the patient? So if I could get AI to solve these things, like prior auth, can we use AI to solve that so that it doesn't even have to come to me? And then for the rare times that it does come to me, can AI generate that letter based on the patient's information so I don't have to do that? And then when it comes to all these medical home value-based care arrangement requirements, a lot of that is based on the work that our medical assistants are doing. So you mentioned medical assistants earlier, right? How can you support the team around you? How can you make their lives better? How can you make the work that they're doing more accurate so that I'm not worried about it and I know that the impact on my patient will be positive? And then how do I communicate with my patients more easily? Who are the patients that I should be proactively reaching out to? How can AI really help me risk stratify patients so that I can reach out or my team members can reach out? So I think just on a practical level, even though there are all these cool things that we can do, I just want to make the day-to-day life of a physician easy. And then once we do that, then we can do all the things.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I do want to just comment real quick on the prior auth piece. I was talking to Bobby over dinner, and then we talked about this on the committee meeting yesterday, that I think if we want to talk about fear of AI, our biggest fear should be when the payers start using AI to figure out how to pay us less, right? Because that's probably already happening. So, just throwing that out there.
An ROI for them.
Yeah, exactly. So, John, I mean, with radiation being so technical, like, and what you're doing at the Brigham and everything, what have you guys seen as barriers, or where do you see the barriers in radiation oncology specifically?
Yeah, so, fell off the microphone. So, radiation oncology specifically, like, I think what drew me into it as a technical person is the technology is such a technologically heavy field And then I was so disappointed. So for those that don't work in radiation oncology is dominated by one vendor. And that one vendor is absolutely phenomenal at hardware radiation oncology and absolutely like one of the worst software technologies in the world of medicine. And they finally, and so that, you know, we're so far behind everyone else in terms of like, if you live in that world and use their software, we're so far behind in EMR capabilities. There's nothing that's even coming close to AI. But finally, in the last 2 years, they've opened bidirectional support for access to their database. So people are starting to find ways to integrate with our biggest technology vendor. Some of the things that I'm really excited about, there's companies like MIM, which is a imaging company. They've developed extremely good AI models for contouring organs at risk, which is an entire job in and of itself. We like hire multiple FTEs, which just do that. And if you can free those people up to, instead of doing these like doldrum drudgery work, to actually working on treating the patient and making treatments safer, there's so many opportunities to dedicate the manpower to other things and take away, like Natalie was talking about, those things that we do that are really just shifting data around that already exists, which those tasks are so they're necessary in the system that we operate in to get reimbursed or to make sure our documentation is correct. They don't actually generate anything new. And so these newer technologies that are coming in, like MIM, eliminating the need for hours upon hours of contouring. There's software that sits on top of the ARIA database and can actually generate your notes for you now. Those are really nascent because they've only had access to that database for the last 2 or 3 years. But I think we're about to see radiation oncology grow up because they've been locked out for so long because of those things. I'm really excited as we move into owning our own facilities to be able to contract with some of those vendors. I always joke that, you know, some of our hospital partners, their job is to keep the data siloed because then patients stay in the hospital forever, or stay in the hospital system forever. But I think we can do really interesting things integrating our data across Tennessee Oncology, across our markets, that allow us to learn from the data without having to put it into a silo and really restrict it from vendor usage.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with us getting into our own Linac business. It's going to open up a big world for you guys, and I'm excited to see how you guys work with that. Andy, yeah, go ahead.
May I add 2 little things?
Yes.
Because we keep talking about integration. The integration with the EMR is such a barrier.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as we said, we demoed a really cool product, a note taking.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it because they wouldn't integrate with the EMR. But then that wasn't the only challenge. The other challenge was they had to get FDA approval as a medical device. And you kind of mentioned that to me, right? So I don't think of AI as a medical device, but there's certain, if there's any kind of medical decision making, clinic notes, they have to get FDA approval as well. So, and then this company did not have that.
Yeah, and you are correct. That is something I discovered about a year ago. I just sort of stumbled across it. But if we build our own AI, I'm not saying that we're going to, but that's something we're going to have to consider as well, right? Like how do we have to get it? And it's FDA. It's a medical device approval, right? So that's a good thing. It's not like a drug approval or anything like that.
Thankfully, they're coming up with new pathways for those things. Like you have breakthrough device development,
right?
BDDs, that move those things through a little bit faster. But yeah, it's very challenging when you're thinking about designing these products or you're thinking about buying them off the shelf. Like you always have the cost to go through the FDA process 100x's everything, and so. And makes it 3 or 4 years longer. And so I think if we're not doing things about it, we do end up standing in the back of the line because that process is just so much harder than every other avenue for AI.
Yeah, and it's going to be a huge barrier. And Andy, I think Dr. Dickson teed you up a little bit, when she brought up the EMR piece, just you sort of have the view of a large network, state to state, talk about the EMR barriers, talk about the other barriers that you're sort of seeing and running into already.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this, but I do believe this ambiance pilot, so this notion that Flatiron is partnered with Ambiance and all of a sudden we'll have this note-taking device, this is something we've been dreaming about in the EHR space since 2008, 2009, we started talking about the ability to do this. Namely, we thought NLP would be transformative, but NLP continued to miss a lot of these things. My big question, if Flatiron leadership were here today, would be your biggest expense. Flatiron's biggest expense, I think, today is these abstractions, abstractors, these cancer registrars that sit at the back end that do nothing but structured data. And so what I'm in my head, what I'm hoping is these LLMs that come out all of a sudden have the ability to map the LLMs to kind of a data model. So now that if we are dictating our notes and the LLM obviously is supervised, so the physician goes back in and corrects it, but then does that all fall to these structured data fields that allows for a lot more insights than we've been unable to get because the unstructured data has been locked away? And all of a sudden, does that dramatically reduce the cost or the burden to carry kind of these cancer registrars? And all of a sudden, Flatiron could be unlocked or park Flatiron aside because, one of the things I was talking about, Larry, like when Flatiron was the most impressive when they actually sold Tennessee Oncology on this and they got rid of ARIA was 2014 to about 2018 when a ton of venture capital was flowing into it. Why? I think the other platform shift that happened a lot was cloud computing. And so all of a sudden, Flatiron came to us and said, we've got a cloud database and we're going to be able to report on anything. And we have natural language processing. And we all kind of bought the hype and a lot of the community moved to that platform. And then the moment that Roche bought them, which we thought would unlock more innovation, but unfortunately, all the innovation stopped. And I will, to their credit, I talked to the head of product, and you were asked this question in your speech, Natalie, but they spend 50% of their capacity on chasing regulatory requirements. So they're working on gender identity projects that are mandated by the state of Maryland, and that's eating up 4 or 5 FTEs in lieu of actually integrating AI with their clinical documentation. So I think they are struggling because ultimately they've got a cost model that doesn't make sense for them to invest in AI. My greatest hope is in the next few years, and I think this is a lot easier with a Flatiron than it is with an Epic. And I lived in a hospital world for 15 years at HCA, and I'll tell you, they would dump hundreds of millions of dollars into their AHR, and it would change nothing. You've got hospital systems that have 15 different affiliated providers with 20 different surgery companies that are all using their own system, and you're never going to fix that mess. Mm-hmm. But I do believe with AI and EHRs, and ideally this clinical documentation that would take away a lot of the complexity, that all of a sudden we can have some truly transformative thing with this platform shift.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of segued into my next question and probably our final question before we'll take questions from you guys. And we'll start with you, John, what are the timelines to get to a point where AI is actually making a difference in our day-to-day, in the radiation space? What are you seeing? You've got a pretty good window with your lab. Is it next year? Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 20 years? What do we think?
I think it's going to come in waves. The way I think about where AI is generally right now is it's like building the railroad. We're building the utilities right now. So you have the development of these large data clusters. People are hoarding NVIDIA chips. And so the next problem is going to be not like the silicone problem, but it's going to be powering these places. There's not enough electricity to power the AI centers that we're going to need in the next 5 years. So I think, the way I think about where AI is generally right now is like we're just slowly laying the railroads down. And where we're going to see the benefit from it is probably going to be in like broadly as a society at about a 5-year to 8-year timeline. There's things that are already working in our field. So like the ones I talked about, like imaging integration to reduce contouring time. Those things are already pretty good and they'll just continue to get better. But all of those things work right now with human, what we call man in the middle, where the human has to be there to check everything. There'd never be an instance where you would let it run and then treat the patient based on what it ran. It's always let it run, a human checks it, and then it goes through another step, and then a human checks it. I think where it's like fully automated with very little checking, we're still probably 3 to 5 years away from anything like that for radiation oncology.
Yeah, yeah. Natalie, in just a big practice, I mean, I know you and I talk about this a lot, but for everyone else, like, what do you see as far as like Tennessee Oncology having AI make a difference in our day-to-day at Tennessee Oncology?
I think it's making a difference already, right? It's already incorporating some AI into our workforce. But in terms of new things, right, for any practice, it's really going to depend on have you built the correct roadmap, right? Have you identified areas that really align with your practice's strategy? Have you received buy-in from not only your physicians, but all of the staff? Have you convinced your patient population or identified barriers for your patients to take this on? And then, for Tennessee Oncology, I mean, we have to ensure that whatever we decide to do, is it in lockstep with OneOncology? Are we doing the same? Are we doing overlapping things? Are we doing competing things, right? Because we want all the practices to kind of move together in one accord. And so there's so many different things to think about, but the most important thing is set your roadmap, set your priorities, ensure that they align with your company strategy.
Yeah, and on that point, Andy, we'll close with you. Just again, from a large network to what Natalie just said, and you Tennessee Oncology doing their own thing. Like, how do you balance that and create a roadmap and put timelines? When you have a Tennessee Oncology who's innovative and forward thinking, and a smaller practice who doesn't have the capital to invest in these things, like, what do you foresee sort of as that, where AI is going to help the entire OneOncology network?
Yeah, just as Dr. Phillips said around this need for supervision. So nobody is doing autonomous driving in their Tesla yet. You can let it drive, but every few seconds you got to touch the steering wheel a little bit. And so I do believe that there will be centralized models. And one of the rabbit holes I've been going down the past 2 months is all of these clinical trial matching vendors. They were pretty much failing a couple of years ago. That got a lot of venture capital, 70, 80, 90 million bucks, and they've kind of gone through the tech recession. A lot of them have been refreshed by LLMs. And so what I'm excited about, at least in lockstep with Tennessee Oncology, because I think, it's my goal to refresh the research program there, is that we can have a centralized model, a supervised model of clinical trial matching. And I think we can leverage LLMs that'll get us a lot more efficient, where it doesn't take 10 or 15 people to do clinical trial matching, but we can have 2, 3, 4 folks, and that we can pick one of these technologies and ideally have it implemented Q3, Q4, and we can start delivering clinical trial matches. Because I do think, from what I've seen, and happy for all of y'all to go on this journey with me, but clinical trial matching was probably at the 70, 80% level. These vendors are coming back to me and showing that, hey, I can match at the 95% level just with these LLMs, just open AIs, generic chat GPT is better at clinical trial matching than kind of the former clinical trial vendors were doing with natural language processing. So I do think there's a lot of upside there, and it's a mission of mine to bring accrual to where it needs to be at Tennessee Oncology, and I think clinical trial matching can be a great way to get there.
And what do you think that timeline is for us to be there?
I mean, I think Neha spoke a little bit about prompt. I think prompt is a nice idea right now. It's a hobby, but unless I can deliver clinical trial matches through it, I don't think it ever gets truly the utilization and the adoption that it needs. But I do think we can develop a screening team, a pre-screening team that can leverage these tools, supervise it, and then deliver the right match to the physician. So it's augmented by AI. It's just to make it more productive. It's certainly not going to be unsupervised. But I do think by the end of the year we can get there.